Hey guys, it's Scarlett here. I have a couple quick announcements for us before we jump in our video. First, on September 26th, next Sunday, we're going to be having the Loft Live. And at this Loft Live, we're gonna have some tailgate games, backyard games, and high schoolers. We're gonna have axe throwing for you guys till 9 p.m. Also, on September 26th will be the last day to sign up for Fall Retreat. So you wanna make sure that you get all your signups in for that. There's gonna be 3 ways that you guys can get to Fall Retreat. First, Friday night of Fall Retreat, you can meet us here at 7 p.m. Secondly, your parent can drop you off after 8 p.m. at Highland Lakes. Or if you have a game going on that night, whatever you have to do, you can meet us out Saturday morning from 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning, and make sure how you have all your paperwork done for that. So there's ways that you guys can get out there. We would love to see you there. So go ahead, pull your phone out for something special. I want you to invite 5 of your friends to come with you, because if we get 200 signups, Lane's gonna jump out of a plane. And we want him to jump out of a plane. So go ahead, invite your friends to do that, because we would love to see him skydive. Well, that's all the announcements I have today. And so I'm so excited to see you next week, and hope you enjoy the video.
All right, y'all. Last week, we started our new series called Joseph at the Loft Live. And we started session 1 with you guys, and we talked about the overarching theme in Joseph's life, that he fears God, and so God is with him. And so today, as you're in your home group, and you've maybe been studying a little bit of Joseph leading into this discussion, we're now going to take the big picture of Joseph's life, and we're going to look at one very huge moment, not just in the life of Joseph, but for the people of Israel, and how it changes their story. And we're going to see, what does it mean for us? And so whereas last week we maybe looked at the overarching story of our lives, we're going to look at, how does Joseph deal with people who have hurt him, so that way we can know how to deal with people who have hurt us, and that it'll connect us to the story of how God deals with his people as well, and why that is such a beautiful thing in the midst of his story. Now, it's interesting being in different generations, because each generation begins to navigate Christian faith a little bit differently than the last. And so we always kind of rebel from the generation before us in one direction or another. And that can either look like Christian subcultures, that can look like a draw to more biblical truth, that can look like different cultural elements that begin to appear within our Christianity, or different practices that we cling to. And sometimes that can be a dangerous thing, but a lot of times it can be a really good thing, just depending on how far we swing to one pendulum or the other. And so one of the defining marks of me being raised as a millennial and by Christian parents was this prioritization of Christian morality over Christian reconciliation. Whereas now my generation really focuses on and wants to lean into more of Christian reconciliation prioritized over Christian morality. Now, neither one of those things are bad. Christian morality is not bad. Christian reconciliation is not bad. And morality just being a big word for goodness or rightness, and reconciliation being a big word for putting a broken thing back together. Neither one of them bad, but when prioritized over the other, they can begin to become dangerous. And so what happens in a world where Christian morality is maybe prioritized over Christian reconciliation in the home is that it teaches kids and people to hide sin and to live in the dark, because we fear what relationship might break, okay? And so this looked like growing up, there was always these upper echelon sins that, should they be committed or be lived in, they would ruin your life, and you could never come back from them. And so you always had in the back of your head that something would happen that could completely derail your life, and it would never be the same. Everything would change. Your whole world could fall apart. And so if you even begin to take steps into that sin, or begin to even think about that sin, or maybe even participate in whatever that sin was, you just hid it. You didn't go to anybody. You didn't try to find rescue, and you didn't try to find reconciliation with the relationship that maybe you've broken. It was this idea, right, as parents used to kind of tell us as kids, God is always watching. And so we were always kind of dealing in this terrifying moment, right? As last week, we talked about the fear of God in our lives. It was this unhealthy fear for God in the midst of all that. And so we became kind of a generation, a people group that we really learned to hide sin, and even the generation before us a little bit. And what happens when people hide sin, and what happens when we begin to live in that way, is we miss out on the beauty of the gospel and a God who gives second chances. And so we were kids sitting in a youth ministry room hearing about a God who had grace and gave second chances and wanted us to come back into relationship with him. And it sounded good and it sounded wonderful and it sounded something like we wanted, but we struggled with attaching any actual movement to that because we had never seen it played out before. Because we can't experience second chances if we don't learn to be repentant of sin. It's hard to understand a God who does things if we've never seen people who do those things. And so we hid ourselves and we hid our sin, and we tried to be two people in different elements, and we missed out on second chances from our parents or from our other relationships. And so really largely we missed out on what it would really look like for God to give us those second chances. Now we take that a step further. What happens when we miss out on the knowledge and the truth of God giving second chances and what that plays out to be? We become a people who have a hard time giving others healthy second chances. Third chances, fourth chances, fifth chances, right? However much grace the people on the other side of that need. And so if we can't experience it for ourselves, then we can't begin to do that in the lives of other people. And it's in the midst of that that we actually walk into the story of Joseph, because where we're going to go in Joseph today is Joseph is going to have this really big moment where he gets to give the people that wronged him a second chance. And it's largely connected to what we talked about last week, his knowledge of who God is and what he wants to do with his people. And here's what I want you to know, man. Whoever maybe God is even in the beginning of this beginning to bring to your heart, who is someone that you can give a second chance to, or that has hurt you or that has wronged you, that you've been withholding grace or forgiveness from them and you haven't been reconciling with them because maybe you've never experienced it on the other side of it. No one's ever given that to you. I mean, begin to ask God, who might that person be? Who might that group of people be? And know this, there is no hurt that you've experienced that Joseph hasn't experienced even worse. And that's not to make little of our own hurt. We all have our own pains. We all have our own struggles. Terrible things have happened to many of us, to some of us, and we're struggling in the midst of that pain. And in our next series playlist, we're going to talk about what some of that pain looks like and how to take that to the Lord and how to work through that. But man, if you're familiar with the story of Joseph, it takes up a huge chunk of the book of Genesis. And we're actually going to kind of jump around a bunch of passages today. And so if you think you're going to flip along with me or scroll along with me, I assure you you're not. You're just going to have to kind of ride with me a little bit. But Joseph starts out as a kid. He has a dream that his brothers bowed down to him. And so he goes and he tells his brothers about his dream, and they don't take that very well because no sibling ever wants to hear their younger sibling telling them, hey, you're going to bow down to me one day. And so naturally they get together and they plot this moment where they're going to kill their little brother. Now, one of the good brothers steps in and goes, oh, no, let's not kill our brother. Murder's a little bit excessive. Instead, let's throw him into a pit. And that brother thinks that he's going to come back and rescue Joseph. But what actually happens is the other brothers are like, well, let's not kill him. Let's make money off of him. And they sell him into slavery. And in a long chain of events, through that and Joseph's faithfulness to God, Joseph becomes one of the highest ranking officials in Egypt. So he goes from boy in a pit sold into slavery to highest ranking official in Egypt. I mean, it's a huge movement, but it started with this moment where people hurt him about the worst that you could ever hurt anyone. And his own brothers, his own family, his own flesh and blood. And it's in the midst of that story that we kind of step into, because what's happening is there's a famine going on. And so as his brothers and the nation of Israel is running out of food, they have to go to Egypt because Egypt has stored up all of this grain and all of this food. And so they have to go and ask for food and for grain from Joseph. Now, the thing is, right, as Joseph's brothers think that he's probably dead. They've sold him into slavery. They don't even know anything about his future, and so they don't know the person that they're about to see is their brother Joseph, and he probably looks like one of the Egyptian natives in so many ways as far as how he's dressed, and they just wouldn't have even connected the dots that he could possibly be there as this high-ranking official. And so when they go, even when they see him, they don't realize like, oh wow, this is my brother. Now, if you'll track with me, maybe you'll walk into chapter 42. What I'm going to do is read some moments to help us connect the story that plays out from the moment that Joseph and his brothers meet together in this interesting moment where they're asking for food. So they come and they ask Joseph for food, and they plead their case. And in verse 14 of chapter 42, it says, "Then Joseph said to them, 'I have spoken, you are spies. This is how you will be tested. As surely as Pharaoh lives, you will not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one from among you to get your brother. The rest of you will be imprisoned so that your words can be tested to see if they are true. If they are not, then as surely as Pharaoh lives, you are spies.' And so Joseph imprisoned them for 3 days. And on the third day, Joseph said to them, 'I fear God.'" Remember, we talked about that last week. "Do this and you will live. If you are honest, let one of you be confined to the guardhouse, while the rest of you go and take grain to relieve the hunger of your households. And bring your youngest brother to me so that your words can be confirmed. Then you won't die." And they consented to this. So Joseph, there's a younger brother that wasn't there when Joseph was a kid. They tell him about his younger brother because Joseph starts asking them all these questions about their family. And he says, "I think that you're spies, but to prove me wrong, I'll put you in prison for 3 days. Then I'm going to keep one of you. The rest of you will then go and retrieve your younger brother and bring him back to me." Now, it feels like Joseph is kind of giving payback to his brothers. And it's going to feel like that for a little bit. We're going to address that because that's kind of a wrong interpretation of what's going on. We're going to talk about that towards the end, but you're going to get that feeling as you go throughout. Man, Joseph is almost playing with his brothers in this payback world. Now, as he's given this command, we then move down to verse 24, and it says, "He turned away from them and wept. And when he turned back and spoke to them, he took Simeon from them and had him bound before their eyes." So Simeon's the brother that stays back to be put in prison. It's this turned and wept moment that really shows us the heart of Joseph, because people who turn and weep are not people that are playing with their brothers or trying to give them payback or trying to take revenge. People who are trying to take revenge don't weep in the middle of these moments, right? Then we move over into verse 37. The brothers get back, they get to their father, and there's this moment between Reuben, one of the brothers, and the father, and it says this, "Then Reuben said to his father, 'You can kill my 2 sons if I don't bring him back to you. Put him in my care, and I will return him to you.'" So the brothers, they get back and they tell their father, "Hey, we've met, we've asked for food. They kept Simeon in prison. They've asked us to bring back Benjamin, our younger brother." And the father's like, "No, I'm not giving you your younger brother." And as a matter of fact, the father points out, "The last brother that hung out with you guys is dead." And he's referring to Joseph. He's like, "Every time one of the younger brothers is with you, they die. And so why would I entrust Benjamin to you when Joseph is already dead?" And so Reuben steps in. Reuben is actually the brother that wanted to rescue Joseph before they sold him into slavery, that kept them from killing him themselves. And he says, "Listen, if we don't come back with Benjamin, you can have my 2 sons into your care and do with them what you will." Right? This idea that, again, even Reuben's heart has changed, that they become a family that has loved one another, not a family that would sell their brothers into slavery. Now, the father does not let them go, but then they begin to run out of food again in chapter 43, verse 3. "But Judah said to him, 'The man specifically warned us, you will not see me again unless your brother is with you. If you will send our brother with us, we will go down and buy food for you. But if you will not send him, we will not go. For the man said to us, you will not see me again unless your brother is with you.'" So Judah tells the dad, "Hey, we're not going back. We're not going back unless you let us take Benjamin, because if we return without him, we're in trouble and we're not going to get food again." And so Judah tells the dad that. The dad then lets them take Benjamin begrudgingly, and they go and they take all of this money back with them to Egypt. That there was a little ploy throughout that they thought it had been made to look like they had stolen some silver, and they hadn't. And so they go, and in verse 15, so that way it doesn't look like they stole it, they bring all of that money back, twice as much back, to prove, right, that they have not committed any crimes. And in verse 15 it says, "The men took this gift, double the amount of silver, and Benjamin, their younger brother, and they immediately went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to his steward, "Take the men to my house, slaughter an animal and prepare it, for they will eat with me at noon." The man did as Joseph had said and brought them to Joseph's house. So Joseph is excited when they get back, and he rewards them for coming back with Benjamin. He actually invites them in their house to eat. Joseph begins to throw a feast in the midst of that. We fast forward into verse 23. Then the steward said, "May you be well, don't be afraid. Your God and the God of your father must have put treasure in your bags. I received your silver." And then he brought Simeon out to them. The steward brought the men into Joseph's house, gave them water to wash their feet, and got feed for their donkeys. Since the men had heard that they were going to eat a meal there, they prepared their gift for Joseph's arrival at noon. When Joseph came home, they brought him the gift they had carried to the house, and they bowed to the ground before him. So they think that they're being walked into a feast in order that Joseph can repay revenge on them for stealing the silver. And they're assured, no, we don't think that you've stolen silver. We want you to have dinner with us. And as a matter of fact, here's your brother Simeon, who's been in captivity with us as a show of good faith. Come, let us wash your feet and have dinner with us. When Joseph gets there and he sees his brothers, again, he's moved. In verse 30, Joseph hurried out because he was overcome with emotion for his brother, and he was about to weep. He went into an inner room and he wept there. Again, not the heart of someone who is trying to pay revenge on his brothers. Now there's one final test in chapter 44. Joseph commands his steward, fill the men's bags with as much food as they can carry, put each one silver at the top of his bag, put my cup, the silver one, at the top of the youngest one's bag, along with the silver for his grain. So he did as Joseph told him. At morning light, the men were sent off with their donkeys. They had not gone very far from the city when Joseph said to his steward, "Get up, pursue the men, and when you overtake them, say to them, 'Why have you repaid evil for good? Isn't this the cup that my master drinks from and uses for divination? What have you done? What you have done is wrong.'" Joseph gives one last test. He sneaks his own cup into the bag of his brothers and sends them off with it. And he's setting up kind of this one last moment to see, are my brothers really repentant? Have they really changed? And all throughout the story, that's what we've seen, right? That the brothers have changed from someone who would sell their youngest brother into slavery to ones who would protect their younger brother, Benjamin, where Reuben would give up his own sons for his little brother, and where they step in and they show up, even when it looks like they've stolen money, they come back with twice as much money, but just continually a repentant heart that they have changed, that they have turned from their sinful ways. So the steward goes out, he finds them, and he asks them to lower their bags. And it says in verse 11, so each one quickly lowered his sack to the ground and opened it. The steward searched, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Then they tore their clothes, and each one loaded his donkey and returned to the city. What they knew is that this was going to be bad news because it looked like they had stolen from Joseph. And again, this whole time, they still don't even know that this is Joseph. They still don't know this is their brother. They just think this is a high-ranking Egyptian official. And what happens is basically Benjamin's life has to be taken by Joseph in this moment. And instead of that, Judah actually speaks in, one of the other brothers, and he says, "Now please let your servant remain here as my Lord's slave in place of the boy. Let him go back with his brothers, for how can I go back to my father without the boy? I could not bear to see the grief that would overwhelm my father." The brother who wanted to have Joseph dead has now changed and is protecting his little brother and offering his own life into slaveship so that way he doesn't have to see his father mourn. And as a response to this, in the middle of verse 14, then Joseph threw his arms around his brother Benjamin and Benjamin wept on his shoulder. Joseph kissed each of his brothers as he wept, and afterwards his brothers talked with him. In this moment, because of Judah's repentant heart, Joseph is moved to see, my brothers have changed. And so he reveals himself as Joseph and says, I am your brother. The bad thing that you meant, God meant good for it. God brought me here, and now I'm going to get to protect our family and our people. And so he invites, he kisses his brothers, he gives them a hug. There's this reunion, this reconciliation, and he invites all of his people in his dad's house to come to Egypt, and he protects them there. And it's actually in this moment that the nation of Israel grows huge and flourishes for this period of time. Now, the whole time, like I said, it's going to look like Joseph is trying to enact revenge on his brothers, but what he's really doing is giving them opportunities to show that they have changed from the men who threw him in a pit to now the men who love and would protect his brothers. He wants to see, has their hearts changed before he gives them second chances? And in that, he is giving them second chances. He is giving them opportunities to change and to show that they have changed, so that way their relationship can rekindle. Here's the deal. The story of the gospel, sometimes we miss this, that it's just free grace and caution to the wind and all these things, but the story of the gospel is actually one of wise second chances. Salvation is found through repentance of sin, turning a changed heart that comes through Jesus Christ. And so walking with Jesus is one of being like Joseph's brothers, that we are changing and there is change to be seen, and that we are walking out of sin and that we are leaving sin behind. And when we do, just like Joseph's brothers, we're invited into this new kingdom. We're invited to the table to eat. We're invited to enjoy the fruits of the one who is over us and of our Lord. And that is this picture in the midst of Joseph's story. And so because God gives us wise second chances, now we have the freedom to be like Joseph and to give others wise second chances. And that doesn't mean that we just withhold grace and forgiveness and that we build up barriers, right? The default is that our understanding of the gospel, for some of us, we move in one direction where we just continually are a doormat and let people walk over us because it's forgiveness, 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 and we never expect to see a changed heart. And then there are others of us who are burning bridges and building walls and not letting anybody else in who has ever wronged us. But the gospel walks squarely in the middle of those things that says there's forgiveness for the repentant. Because I am repentant, God has forgiven me because he is good and I am not, and I am chasing his goodness. And now I can do the same with others. And it doesn't matter how much repentance, there's not an just to see that there is change. And so I give them wise second chances, and then we become a church and a people and a family that give wise second chances. And that's what our hope is that here in the Loft, that you find a place, man, that doesn't judge you for who you are, but doesn't let you stay there. Lets you walk out of sin and walk into the kingdom of God, that we can more enjoy fully who he is because we have left behind who we once were and we have entered into who he has for us. And we invite others to do the same. As God has given us a wise second chance, let us be a family that gives others the same. Talk about that in your small groups tonight. Pray about that in your small groups tonight and wonder, man, what might it look like this week to begin to take down my walls and give someone else a second chance, to give them an opportunity to show that they've changed. So that way our relationships can rekindle and we can enjoy this moment like in the middle of verse 45 where we're hugging and we're together and there's reconciliation.